She walked down the aisle with fear in her heart, forced into a marriage with a billionaire colder than ice. But what began as a loveless contract twisted into a storm of secrets, obsession, and undeniable passion. Isla Morgan never expected to uncover the truth behind his past or awaken a fire he spent years trying to bury. Who really holds the power when the heart is on the line? This story will leave you breathless. Tell us, where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a single chapter of Isla and Cassian's unforgettable journey. The gown hugged every inch of my body, not just fabric but chains sewn from silk and sacrifice. It shimmered beneath the vaulted ceiling of the cathedral, catching flecks of light that danced mockingly across the marble aisle as I walked. With each step, the hem whispered across the red carpet, a gentle, trailing sound that echoed too loudly in the hollow quiet of the room. All around me, eyes burned holes through the lace veil that framed my face, their stares laced with judgment, pity, curiosity. They knew. Everyone knew. This wasn't a wedding born from love. It was a contract sealed in desperation and convenience, and I was the currency traded. My breath lodged in my throat as my gaze lifted, meeting the figure at the altar. Cassian Ward. The name alone stirred headlines and power. CEO of Ward Dynamics. A man who had never once been seen as vulnerable, whose empire touched every continent and whose heart, if it existed, was buried beneath layers of granite resolve. He stood like a monument to indifference, tall, chiseled, immovable. His suit was dark as obsidian, tailored to perfection, his hands loosely clasped in front of him with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. His eyes didn't find me, not once. Not as I approached, not as I stopped beside him. I could have been a shadow, a painting hung for decoration, and it would have earned more attention than I did. My pulse throbbed in my ears, drowning out the organ's soft exit. The shuffling of the crowd. I could feel the weight of the veil on my shoulders, the flowers trembling in my grip. I wasn't nervous because I was about to marry a stranger. I was terrified because I was marrying a ghost, a man with no visible heartbeat, no flicker of hesitation, no warmth. The moment the priest began to speak, the words rang hollow, distant, as though I were watching this unfold on a screen rather than living it. I forced myself to breathe, slow and deep, though every breath felt like swallowing glass. I could sense the audience's gaze dissecting me. Women in couture whispered behind gloved hands, their perfume-heavy presence a cloud of scrutiny. They analyzed the tightness of my smile, the trembling of my fingers, the crack in my composure. To them, I was a spectacle. To Cassian, I was an arrangement. To myself, I wasn't even sure what I was anymore. When the priest asked the question, "Cassian Ward, do you take Isla Morgan to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Time slowed. A hush fell so deep I could hear the rustle of my own gown. My heart, traitorous, leapt with a flicker of hope. Maybe he would say no. Maybe he'd walk away, dissolve this whole twisted farce, and release me from this beautiful prison. But then he spoke, and it wasn't a voice, it was a verdict. I do. 2 syllables, cold, final, absolute. My turn came, and I couldn't find my voice. My tongue felt thick, my throat parched. I stared at the priest, then at Cassian, then down at the ring in his hand, simple, metallic like the edge of a blade. My lips parted, and the words barely escaped. I do. I didn't believe them. They weren't mine. They belonged to a woman who had already surrendered. He slid the ring onto my finger. His touch was light, efficient, lacking any emotion that might make this feel real. No pause, no squeeze, no tremble. I didn't even look at him when I returned the gesture. I was afraid if I did, I'd unravel. And then came the kiss. The one moment where love is meant to bloom in front of witnesses, a symbol of union, of shared futures. Cassian turned to me for the first time. His eyes were sharp, impassive. He leaned in and pressed a single, fleeting kiss to my cheek. Not even a kiss, a brush, a formality, a statement. I didn't exist to him. Not as a woman, not as a wife, only as a deal fulfilled. And somewhere deep inside me, something began to crack. The reception was a blur of clinking champagne glasses, polite laughter, and hollow congratulations that barely scraped the surface of civility. Cassian moved through the crowd like a general inspecting his troops, all sleek precision and detached charm. Investors, board members, political allies, they all lined up with their flattery like soldiers offering tribute. He shook hands, made eye contact, smiled with just the right amount of calculation. I stood at his side like a well-placed prop, a silent mannequin in an overpriced gown. No one asked me questions. No one really saw me. I was the proof of a merger, not the bride of the hour. I tried to fake a smile, to pretend like this was normal, like this wasn't the slow unraveling of everything I thought I understood about freedom and fate. But each time his hand grazed the small of my back to guide me forward, each time he whispered something meaningless into my ear. "Smile, Isla, they're watching." I wanted to scream. Not because he was cruel. No, that would have been easier. Cassian wasn't cruel, he was worse. He was indifferent, entirely, excruciatingly indifferent. When the last toast had been made and the last guest waved their farewells, I finally exhaled. My cheeks ached from smiling. My feet throbbed inside heels that now felt like shackles. The ballroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the scent of roses and champagne and the thick residue of pretense. I glanced at Cassian, wondering if he'd say anything, acknowledge me in any real way now that the show was over. But he didn't. He merely adjusted the cuff of his shirt, checked his watch, and turned to the waiting chauffeur without so much as a glance in my direction. I followed wordlessly, my train dragging like a ghost behind me. The car was a sleek black town car, polished to a mirror shine, waiting like a hearse for a bride with no future. As we slid into the back seat, silence fell like a thick curtain between us. Cassian didn't look at me, not once. His gaze was fixed ahead, his jaw set, one hand resting lazily on his knee, the other curled around the armrest. The gold band on his finger caught the passing streetlights, reflecting brief flashes of something that felt more like irony than commitment. I turned toward the window, watching the city blur past. Outside, life went on, cars honking, neon signs flickering, people laughing as they spilled out of bars and cafes. The world didn't stop for a loveless marriage. The world didn't care. I opened my mouth to speak, to break the silence, but the words died before they reached my lips. What would I say? That I hated this? That I didn't even know who I was anymore? That I wasn't a thing to be bought and shelved? But I already knew what his answer would be. You agreed. We arrived at the penthouse too quickly. A towering glass monolith that pierced the clouds, perched above the city like a crown. The elevator ride was silent. The soft hum of machinery the only sound as the numbers ticked upward. I stood beside him, feeling small and stiff, trying not to let the pressure of his presence crush me. When we stepped into the apartment, the first thing I noticed was how cold it felt. Not in temperature, though the marble floors and high ceilings didn't help, but in energy. The place was pristine, minimalist, almost surgical, like no one had ever lived here, like no one was meant to. Cassian shrugged off his jacket and tossed it onto the back of a designer chair without care. I lingered by the doorway, not sure if I was allowed to step further, not sure where I belonged. He turned to me finally, his expression unreadable. Your room is the second door on the left. That was it. No welcome, no instructions, no glance backward. The words hit me harder than a slap, so final, so cold. My throat tightened, but I forced a nod, swallowing down the ache rising in my chest. He walked away without another word, disappearing into the hallway as if I weren't even real. I stood there for a long moment, frozen in place, surrounded by luxury I couldn't feel. My dress, once a fantasy of elegance, now clung to me like a cage. I had never felt so alone. And worse, I had never felt so invisible. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood in that cavernous hallway, still dressed in white, feeling like a ghost who had accidentally wandered into the wrong life. I should have moved. I should have gone to the room he assigned me, peeled off the gown, and tried to sleep off the nightmare. But I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the marble, my hands clenched tightly at my sides. The silence in the penthouse was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of city life far below. So far away it might as well have been a different planet. I turned slowly, eyes skimming over the impersonal space, the endless white walls, the clean lines, the untouched surfaces. Everything in this place was sharp, cold, and deliberate, just like him. I finally forced myself to move, heels clicking softly on the marble floor, the sound feeling too loud in the stillness. I stepped past the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, avoiding my reflection in the glass. I didn't want to see the girl in the wedding dress. She didn't look like me anymore. When I reached the door, I paused. My hand hovered over the knob, but something made me turn. just for a moment. And there he was. Cassian stood at the end of the hallway, backlit by the glow of a muted wall sconce. He wasn't in a suit anymore. His jacket was gone, his tie undone, the top buttons of his shirt loosened to reveal a sliver of pale skin beneath the collar. Shadows clung to his face, making the sharp angles of his features even more intense. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Dark, focused, burning with something I couldn't name. He didn't speak, not at first. He just stood there watching me. My breath caught. The air between us thickened, buzzing with electricity. Then his voice came, low and rough, slicing through the tension like a blade. "You should be asleep." I swallowed hard, heat rising to my face. "So should you," I said, surprised by the sound of my own voice. It came out more defiant than I intended, soft but not weak. A slow, unreadable smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not kind, not amused, something else. Predatory. Dangerous. He stepped closer, one slow, deliberate stride at a time, like a storm rolling in, silent but inevitable. I backed up instinctively, my spine brushing the cool surface of the wall behind me. My heart thudded, not out of fear, but something far more volatile. When he reached me, he didn't touch me. Not yet. He just looked down at me, his gaze devouring, assessing. His presence alone made my skin prickle, my breath shallow. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to ask why he married me, why he brought me into his world only to cast me aside. But no words came. I was paralyzed by the intensity of the moment, by the strange, twisted connection that sparked between us. He braced one hand against the wall beside my head, his body mere inches from mine. I could feel the warmth radiating off him, smell the faint scent of whiskey and spice on his skin. His voice dropped to a whisper, velvet-edged with steel. "How do you expect me to sleep," he murmured, "when I know you're here, like this?" The question knocked the air from my lungs. I should have pushed him away, told him to back off. But I didn't. I couldn't. His words wrapped around me like fire, melting the walls I'd built to protect myself. My lips parted, but no sound came out. "You belong to me now, Isla," he said, and the finality in his tone made my knees go weak. I should have denied it. I should have rejected the very idea of belonging to anyone, least of all him. But I didn't move. I didn't speak, and that was enough. He saw the surrender in my silence. He reached for my wrist, his touch firm but not cruel, and pulled me gently forward. My body collided with his, and I gasped. His chest was solid heat beneath my palms, his heartbeat calm and steady, the opposite of the wild rhythm thundering in my own. He looked down at me, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes, something raw, unguarded, a warning, a promise. Then he leaned in, his mouth near my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "Tell me to stop." But I didn't, and we both knew I wouldn't. The days that followed blurred together, a surreal mix of silence and shadows. Cassian wasn't cruel, but he wasn't kind either. He remained an enigma, intense one moment, aloof the next. Sometimes I caught him watching me across the room with those dark, unreadable eyes, and I couldn't tell if he was curious or calculating. Other times he moved around me like I wasn't even there. It was maddening, this push and pull, like he was playing a game only he knew the rules to. And I hated how much it affected me, how my body reacted to the smallest flicker of attention from him, how I found myself searching for him in the silence. I needed air, I needed clarity. So one afternoon, while he was on a call behind closed doors, I wandered into his private study. It was the only room he kept locked, and I'd never seen him come or go without carefully turning the key. But today, the door was slightly ajar. A mistake, or maybe an invitation. My heart thudded as I stepped inside. It was a stark room, minimalist, pristine, but with one exception, a small drawer in the corner desk that looked worn, almost out of place. Drawn by something I couldn't name, I moved toward it. My fingers trembled as I tugged it open, expecting paperwork, maybe some files. What I found instead were photographs, a stack of them, carefully kept, worn at the edges. A woman smiled back at me from the glossy prints. Tall, elegant, eyes like mine. My breath hitched. She could have been my sister. Or no, not quite. There were differences, the shape of her mouth, the curve of her jaw, but still, the resemblance was startling. Her name was scribbled on the back of one photo in Cassian's unmistakable handwriting, Serena. There were letters, too, dozens of them. Some typed, some scrawled in messy ink, some never sent. My fingers trembled as I unfolded one, dated 3 years ago. I can't sleep. Not without hearing your voice. It's torture, Serena. I still see you everywhere. My pulse quickened. My chest tightened. This woman, she was more than just someone from his past. She had been everything to him. I didn't hear him enter, but I felt it. The shift in the air, the way the temperature seemed to drop. I turned slowly, the letter still in my hand. What are you doing? His voice was low, dangerous, a thundercloud barely holding back the storm. My throat went dry. Who was she? He didn't answer right away. He crossed the room in 2 strides and snatched the letter from my fingers, stuffing it back into the drawer. His hands were shaking. Cassian Ward, shaking. Serena, he said finally, the name like a blade. She was my fiancée. I nodded slowly, trying to process what that meant. She looked like me. He turned away from me, ran a hand through his hair, the tension radiating from him like heat. That's not why I married you? Is it part of it? I pressed, my voice cracking. Did you choose me because I reminded you of her? His silence was the only answer I needed. It hit harder than a slap. So this is what I am to you, I said, voice rising bitter. A replacement, a ghost you can control this time. That's not true. He snapped, finally meeting my gaze. At first, maybe, but not anymore. You're not her, Isla. You're not Serena. Then what am I? I whispered. He crossed the room again, and this time when he reached for me, his touch was different. Less calculated, more human. His fingers brushed my jaw. You're real, and you're here, and that scares the hell out of me. I should have pulled away. I should have told him I didn't want to be his therapy, but when his mouth found mine, there was nothing left to say. The kiss was raw, desperate, a collision of memory and present, of pain and need. We didn't speak as he led me to the couch, didn't talk as his hands roamed my skin like he was trying to convince himself I wasn't an illusion. And when he finally pulled away, breathless and shaken, I saw something flicker in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope and fear. Because he wasn't just mourning Serena anymore. He was beginning to fall for me. It started with a note, slipped under my bedroom door in the early hours of the morning. Just 4 words, scrawled in jagged ink, "You'll end up dead." I stared at it for a long moment, the paper trembling in my fingers. My first instinct was denial, a prank, a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a joke. This was a threat. And something told me it wasn't the last. When I showed the note to Cassian, his expression changed in an instant. The mask of control cracked, only for a second, but enough for me to see the rage and panic flash in his eyes. He grabbed the note, scanned it, then immediately reached for his phone. "Security doubles, starting tonight," he barked into the receiver. "No one gets near her, no one." I stood there, stunned. "You think this has something to do with Serena?" He didn't answer right away. He paced, jaw clenched, one hand gripping the back of his neck. "It's possible," he said eventually, voice low. "There were circumstances surrounding her death. An accident, they said." But I never believed that. A chill ran down my spine. "You think someone killed her?" "I think someone wanted to hurt me," he admitted. "And now they think they can use you to finish the job." The pieces clicked into place. The rushed marriage, the constant surveillance, the way he kept me close yet emotionally distant. This wasn't just about guilt or grief. Cassian had been protecting me, in his own twisted, closed-off way. And he hadn't told me, because telling me would make it real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the city lights painting slow-moving shadows across the walls. I kept hearing footsteps in the hallway, every creak of the floorboards making my heart leap. At some point, I got up, unable to take the silence. I wandered into Cassian's room without knocking. He was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. When he heard me, he looked up, and there was no armor left, just a man fraying at the edges. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, but it lacked conviction. I couldn't sleep. He didn't respond, just looked at me like he was trying to memorize me in case I vanished. I walked toward him slowly, hesitantly, until I was standing between his knees. His hands came up, almost involuntarily, resting on my hips, his touch light but grounding. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," I said. He looked up at me, eyes searching mine. "Neither do I." And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or desperate like before. It was slow, reverent, a promise wrapped in silence. He pulled me onto the bed, and this time there were no walls between us. No ghosts, No guilt, just skin and breath and a kind of hunger that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with need. He held me like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart, and maybe I was. When it was over, we lay tangled in the sheets, his arms slung over my waist, his breath warm against my neck. "I married you to protect myself," he whispered, "but I never expected to need you." I turned to face him, brushing my fingers through his tousled hair. "And now?" His eyes met mine, and there was no hesitation in his answer. "Now I'd burn down the world to keep you safe." In the days that followed, the tension didn't disappear, but something shifted. We became partners in the storm. Cassian showed me the files he had kept hidden, records of Serena's accident, security footage that had gone missing, names of people who might have had motives. We pieced together the truth bit by bit, as if solving her death could somehow save us both. The threats didn't stop, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew what I meant to him now. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a stand-in. I was Isla Morgan. And I was his. Late one evening, as we stood by the massive windows overlooking the city, he slipped his arms around my waist from behind and whispered into my ear, "I've spent so long trying not to feel anything." I leaned into him, smiling softly. "And now I feel everything." And as the stars shimmered above the skyline, I realized something I never thought I would. I was home. Not in the marble and glass, not in the title of Mrs. Ward, but in him. He had been a fortress once, but for me, he opened the gates, and I walked right in. Some love stories don't begin with fireworks or fairy tales. They begin with silence, hesitation, and pain. But if there's one powerful lesson to take from Isla and Cassian's journey, it's this: healing often hides behind the walls we build to protect ourselves. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one who sees you most clearly. And love, real love, doesn't always arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrives wrapped in challenge, in vulnerability, and in moments that force you to grow. Isla began as a pawn in a game far bigger than herself, and Cassian was a man trapped by ghosts of his past. Yet through fear, heartbreak, and uncertainty, they uncovered something neither had ever truly known: connection. Not just physical, but emotional, soul deep. The kind that doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes who you are. So remember this: just because something starts in darkness doesn't mean it won't lead to light. Sometimes it's in the most unexpected unions that we discover who we're meant to become. Trust isn't given, love isn't forced. But when it's real, when it's earned, it has the power to rewrite every chapter you thought was already set in stone. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional, dramatic stories like this one. There's so much more to come, and you won't want to miss a single moment.